Death is not an easy topic to talk about. Um, Whenever someone brings up death, they bring up the worst of it. Whenever a certain person passes away, I the majority of the time people are gonna be sad about it because there might be certain people that they look up to or people that they were close with, and now that they're gone and they can never see them again. Then yeah, that's a heavy topic to talk about. And how do animated films, concentrate more about the topic of death, because animated movies, most of them like to market towards children. So how do animated movies, the ones that, try to you know, to whose majority of the audience is to children. I'm not saying animated movies are just for children. I'm saying the animated movies whose main target are the children. How is that film gonna, address the topic of death? Well, I have four movies that I'm gonna talk about, which one of them I don't have, that center around the theme of death. So first off, we're gonna talk about the most obvious choice for an animated movie that has death in it: Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Yeah, I'm gonna brag about it that I have on. Oh, look, I have it on Blu-ray. So yeah, Puss in Boots. At the beginning of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Puss is arrogant. He loves the adventure. He loves the thrill. He's not a bad person, but he does love the thrill of the adventure to the point where he doesn't even care about his own life whenever he embarks on the adventures and the fights he has. Because he's a cat. He has 9 lives, but when he's at his ninth life, he acts like he doesn't care because he's faced death multiple times. But suddenly we see this bounty hunter. You see, I make those big air quotes. Tries to hunt him down, and that's when Puss realizes, oh shoot, I'm really being cornered right now, and that's when he starts running away. He starts running away from the bounty hunter. He then sees a bounty hunter again and starts getting scared. And then the third time he sees him, he realizes he's not He's not a bounty hunter. He's Death, and he's come for Puss in Boots because Death itself is annoyed at Puss that he has 9 lives, but he hasn't put any value to them. Yeah, sorry for the loud noises downstairs. But anyways, yeah. Death is after Puss because normally all of us only have 1 life, but Puss is given 9 of them and he wastes them immediately. He didn't put any thought or care into any of them. You take 16 hours to build the Daily Bugle and one of your siblings accidentally destroy it. Anyways, yeah, and now the Death is mad because Puss didn't put any value in his life, and now he wants to track him down in his 9th life because he's like, oh, the 9th one's not gonna be so different from the past ones, aren't they? And then that's when Puss realizes that even though he has 1 life, it should be valued. That life is something we should value. That even though we're dying, we still have to appreciate it. We still have to appreciate life. We still have to appreciate life and those who also have one, because we only have one, and we have to make it count. And it's also a turning point for Puss because after he faces death, he's no longer the cocky hero he originally was. He's now someone more. How do I say this? He's someone more taught. He's someone more educated now because of his confrontation with the person that is Death. So Death says, I will see you again, right? And Puss says, yes, until the death in Spanish. And then he whistles, but this time it seems more hopeful that even though Puss will die someday, he will see him again. And I like how in the movie, it's not like Death is a bad, like Death, they don't like defeat Death in the movie, nor is like Death a bad character. He's just annoyed of Puss like wasting his lives. It's reasonable. And also, Puss doesn't defeat Death because, and I like how Puss doesn't kill Death because, that's kind of, because, that's kind of contradicts the Death being Death. And he doesn't defeat Death. He just accepts like death is a normal part of life, So yeah, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish does a great and excellent job at portraying death and life. Life and death, if you say. Next up, my favorite animated movie of all time, Rango. Yeah, I love Rango. If you see my When the Spanish Dub is Better video, you'll know that Rango is a very quotable movie in Spanish. And one thing that also is memorable about Rango, it's the cool villain. It's the coolest villain design ever, Rattlesnake Jake. throughout the course of Rango, we see this lizard who doesn't have a name. He's a blank canvas waiting to be something. And then suddenly he gets into a car accident, and then he's at the desert. And everybody's saying, "Oh shoot, the sheriff's dead." And then he's like, "Hey, I can pretend to be a sheriff because he's an actor. He's a thespian. He's not a person." And he's a chameleon, and he just fails to blend in. But finally, when he's given an opportunity to pretend to be someone, he blends in with the crowd. He's finally the sheriff that everybody wants. But that's not in his head. But that's not in Rango's head. Rango, which is the name that now he's been given, he's like, no, he pretends he's like this badass from the West. Does gunslinging, killed the Jenkins brothers. He pretends like he's a hotshot. He's not being the hero just because the people need a hero. He's being a hero because that fuels his ego. Then out of nowhere, Rattlesnake Jake, being the cool guy that he is, shames Rango in front of everyone that he's just a fake. And after being humiliated by Rattlesnake Jake and the entire town of dirt, Rango is now humiliated. He's back to that blank canvas waiting to be something again. So naturally, he crosses the other side of the road, which is another metaphor of death, with Rattlesnake Jake also being a metaphor of death. And after Rango crosses the other side of the road, Rango is kind of basically dead. I'm not talking about like the lizard is dead, like rest in peace. I'm talking about his ego. The egotistical persona of Rango is dead. And then after Rango crosses the road, he sees the Spirit of the West, which is obviously Clint Eastwood, but Clint Eastwood doesn't voice Clint Eastwood in Rango. Anyways, the Spirit of the West tells Rango that instead of pretending to be a hero, be the hero. It's not about what you think of yourself. It's about what they need. No man can walk out of his own story. My God, that line is so amazing. This movie is a masterpiece, you guys. After that, Rango, the egotistical persona, dies, and now the true spirit of Rango comes out. He is now finally that badass gunslinger. He tells everyone that he is. He confronts the Rattlesnake Jake, which is death, and accepts that my ego is not going to take me anymore. And after that, Rattlesnake Jake realizes that Rango is not messing around. This chameleon is not messing around. So that's when he realizes, wow, he had the gunslinger spirit inside him, and he tips his hat to him, one legend to another. Now, one thing that I really like about Rango is that in here, it says that death is really something you shouldn't mess with, kind of like in Puss in Boots, but instead Rango is using, his heroic persona as a facade, just so he can, so everybody can feel his ego. Then death comes out of nowhere and tells him that you're just a fake. You still know you're a fake, right? And after that, Rango crosses the road. He wants to kill himself, but after that, he kind of dies. His ego dies. And he now finally becomes that gunslinger he used to pretend he was. And now death accepts that he is now that gunslinger after trying to cross that road no one wants to dare cross, which is, the line between life and death. So yeah, I think this movie does a great way of saying that, death can change all of us one way or another. Whether it be an egotistical persona or just an outlook of life. See, Rango, amazing depiction of death. Next up, we got Kung Fu Panda, the second one. Now, Kung Fu Panda 2 is what I call a sequel upgrade. I mean in a good way. I'm not saying the first one's terrible, but the second one exceeds it far much better. It has a better villain, has a better story. The drama is upped, the action is upped, the antes in this movie are amazing. And one thing that really is the most notable, feature of this film is the death of Po's mother. And throughout the movie, we're teased that, that a panda lady, was taking care of Po before she runs away. And then when Po confronts Shen in a cocky manner, he meets the soothsayer, and then she tells him that this place is where you were born. And then suddenly Poe gets flashbacks of when he used to live in that village. And then he finally gets that memory of Shen and his men attacking the village with the amazing with an amazing score, with the amazing score known as Poe Knows the Truth playing. I still get goosebumps hearing the strings in my head. I don't even have to listen to the music. I can just listen to the music in my head and I still get goosebumps every single time I get to the violin part. You know, the you know that. Anyways, finally Poe, you know, suddenly he suddenly gets pain. He suddenly gets PTSD pains because he doesn't want to remember that. Then the soothsayer says, "Stop fighting. Let it go. Let the memory flow." And then, you know, Poe starts doing the inner peace lesson that Shifu tried to teach him. And then after that, he finally sees the entire memory. And that's when the soothsayer says, "Your story may not have such a happy beginning, but it's the rest of the story of who you choose to be." And then that's when, and then, you know, ah man, that scene is amazing. That's when Poe finally realizes how to conquer himself before conquering others. And how is death depicted in a movie? And death is depicted where Poe wants to seek revenge for whatever Shen did. But then after confronting Shen, he knows he can't defeat him if if he just puts his anger first. He realizes that even though Shen has murdered thousands, heck, even probably millions of Poe's like species, he still wants to forgive him because he still wants to forgive him because he knows that you can't defeat a person if you just put your head first and then thoughts later. So death depicted in this movie in Kung Fu Panda 2 is basically saying, yes, it is traumatic, and you really want to, you really want to like fuel your revenge on the person who did it, but you can't. But you will not always, defeat him if you put your anger ahead of you. You must learn to forgive. You must learn to forgive in order to truly defeat the quote unquote villain. And one thing that I like about this movie is that Shen, he tells Poe that his parents didn't love him because Shen actually knows how it feels like to have your parents, tell you that they don't love you. He experienced it firsthand when his parents abandoned him. So he uses that past experience on Poe because he knows how it'll affect Poe and it'll weaken him. It'll give him an open blank when he shoots him in the cannon. God, that movie is amazing. These three movies are amazing. Now the fourth one is the movie where everybody just says, "Oh, the ending's so sad," but I haven't watched the rest of the movie. Wait. Iron Giant. Iron Giant, it came out like 24 years ago. It's about to be like 25. Dang. Anyways, Iron Giant, we have this giant robot. You got this giant robot from a civilization that probably no one knows about. And then this guy named Hogarth, which embarrassing name, finds the robot and decides to keep him. But the FBI, is skeptical about this whole thing. But Hogarth knows that the Iron Giant is a good guy. How does death correspond to the movie? Well, there's a scene in the movie where the Iron Giant sees like a beautiful deer doing nothing, and then these hunters come along, and now the Iron Giant is frustrated. Then Hogarth also feels sad, and he tells the Iron Giant that death is sad, but it's not always a bad thing. Some good things can come out of death. And after what Hogarth said, the United States Army is like, let's launch a nuke because that robot is a threat. And then that's when the Iron Giant, sacrifices himself, not for because it's sad, but because, yeah, it's kind of sad, but he does it to protect the lives of many people. So necessarily, he's not dying because of a bad thing. He's doing it for a good cause. So what this movie is trying to tell us is that death may not always be a bad thing. All those Disney movies where like the parent dies, they're like, oh, death is such a bad thing, cry about it. But in this movie, they're telling us that death is not always sad. There are some good things that can come out of death. It can make you stronger as a person. Like when you experience death. So yeah, I like this movie. I like how this movie portrays death, that is not always somber. So I have said 4 movies that say that death is not a bad thing, and how they portray death in the movies, which don't do a bad job, and they do an amazing job. So what is the opposite? What is the opposite of death? Well, like, what is the opposite of like a good of a good animated movie showing the topic of death? Almost every, and I mean almost every Disney movie has to have a parent dying. And that scene is the one where like, oh no, that's so horrible. Why did they take him/her away? Mostly her. Um, they're saying that like, oh look at that, look what death did to them. Now it's like what the only thing that fuels the character. Now, this is kind of like the opposite what Kung Fu Panda 2 is trying to say. Don't get revenge. Don't actually, get revenge on the person by, trying to do the same thing they did to like the person they killed. Try to have sympathy. But Disney's like, nope, death is a bad thing, and they have to get revenge. Rose, there won't be a plot. Lion King, Mufasa's death, falls off a cliff. Mufasa falls off a cliff. Simba cries, and we say that's like a bad thing, and that doesn't like characterize Simba at all. His father died, and he's like, nah, I'm not gonna go back there. I'm not gonna go back there. But what does make him come back is that he's like, oh shoot, my uncle is. I know he's a bad person, so I'm gonna go. He doesn't know that his dad was killed by Scar until he told him. So basically, he's not going back to take revenge on Scar because he knows that he killed his father. He's going to take revenge on Scar for the throne because he knows he's a bad person, which isn't bad character motivation, I'm not saying, but it is kind of, I'm not saying it's not a great representation of like death. It's saying that, it's saying that, death is kind of a bad thing when they take away your parents. But I also do love that scene where like Mufasa's like, remember who you are, son. And that's when he tells him, about being the great king. About being a great king. So, Lion King, not a great representation of death, not a great like theme of death. And another movie that I think does an okay job at death is Barnyard. The movie where like Kevin James voices a male cow with udders. There's a scene where like Sam Elliott, that also voices a cow with udders, dies, which is like the son of like Kevin James, male cow with udders. Ben dies in the movie, and then Otis is sad about it, but that's when his dad's dead, and he's afraid to take up the mantle of his dad because his dad knows how to be serious. All Otis knows is how to be a party animal. And then when he tries to like go hunt down the coyote that took away the chickens, he gets cocky, and then gets almost defeats the wolves, and then he gets beat up. And then that's when he realizes what his father was trying to tell him all along, that a strong man stands up for himself, a stronger man stands up for others. That's when his father dies, he finally knows what he was trying to say to him all along at the beginning of the film. And his father's death and like the perspective of you trying to be the next leader is what fuels him to, how he defeats the coyotes and his friends as well. And then that's when he reassures the coyotes like, hey, guess what? You remember me? I'm Ben's kid. And that's when he tells the coyote to stay off his turf. So yeah, and here it's saying that death can motivate us all. Not in a bad way, but in a good way as well. So, but the message they say to it, it's kind of not good, but not bad as well. So I'm going to give Barnyard 1 thumbs up out of 3 for that. So yeah. So how would I, so these movies, I already listed movies that do a great job, a movie that did a sort of bad job at it, and a movie that does a sort of okay job at it. So how would I represent death if I made like an animated movie targeted towards children? I would say that, death is not the end. Death is not like the end for all of us, the theory of the afterlife is still ahead of us. And there's also people around us who can grow up and mature after the passing of someone else. So yeah, those are movies that, I showed that have a great message that correlates to the topic of death and, how it can be applied to the real world as well. But anyways, that's all I have to say. Is there a movie that I have missed that also, talks about the correlating theme of death? If you do know one, you can keep it to yourself or you can keep it in the comments. Either way is fine. But I would be interested if I missed a movie that also, corresponds to theme of death. It can be animated or it can't be animated. I'm kind of fine. Anyways, yeah, see ya.